In a brave step that has sparked pride throughout Africa and sent shockwaves through Western power corridors, Namibia's newly elected president, Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, announced that U.S. nationals will no longer be able to enter her country without a visa as of April 3, 2025. This pioneering woman, Namibia's first female leader, has questioned the long-standing Western privilege on African territory with a daring determination reminiscent of Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso. This is not just a change in policy. It is a seismic shift, a loud declaration of sovereignty that reverberates from the Atlantic coast to the Namib Desert dunes. In an attempt to increase tourism and uphold the perception of a friendly Africa, Namibia has long embraced U.S. and Western visitors, granting them visa-free entry for a maximum of 90 days. Just 1 week into her historic term, however, President Nandi-Ndaitwah has turned the tide with a policy based on the reciprocity principle. If Namibians have to go through time-consuming visa applications, embarrassing interviews, and expensive fees to enter the United States, then Americans will now have to go through the same procedure when they visit Namibia. This decision is about dignity, about an African country holding its ground and saying enough is enough. And it is not only about visas. Too long, Western countries, bolstered by their colonial legacies and clad in their conceit, have viewed Africa as their playground, a place to take advantage of, control, and belittle. They have put our people under strict visa requirements, making us grovel before their embassies to prove our value and plead for permission to enter their countries, as though we were less than human. Their passports serve as a golden ticket to unfettered access, and their citizens have entered our nations with impunity in the interim. However, Nandi-Ndaitwah has torn up that script and thrown it into the fires of revolution, just like Captain Ibrahim Traore did before her. She is not here to curry favor with Westerners. Her purpose here is to demand deference. You'll notice the similarities if you've been following Captain Ibrahim Traore, the young firebrand from Burkina Faso. The 37-year-old military chief who took control in 2022, Traore, has evolved into a representation of African resistance, a David resolutely defeating the Goliath of Western imperialism. He has severed links with neo-colonial puppet strings, dismissed French troops, and challenged the West to deal with an independent Burkina Faso. A generation has been inspired by his bravery, demonstrating that Africa's young people, and now its women, can compete with the world's supposed superpowers and not back down. At 72, Nandi-Ndaitwah adds a new dimension to that same boldness. She has experienced hardship before. As a teenager, she began her career as a freedom fighter with SWAPO, fighting against South Africa's suffocating grip on Namibia under apartheid. She has risen through the ranks to become a titan in her own right, despite facing exile, imprisonment, and the pressures of a male-dominated political arena. And now that she is president, she is directing the mentality of a warrior into a policy that shouts, "You will no longer use Africa as a doormat." Like Traore, she has no qualms about upsetting people, confronting the U.S., a country that considers itself to be the judge of international law, and threatening to demand visas from you if you demand them from us. Fair is fair. As expected, the West is clinging to its pearls. Their media channels and think institutes are already spreading rumors of economic sabotage and a drop in tourism. They will tell you that Namibia's $90 entry visa price, which is insignificant when compared to what Africans pay for U.S. visas, will deter American tourists and hurt the country's economy. However, their crocodile tears should not be taken as gospel. Economics has nothing to do with this. It has to do with power. The fact that a black African woman has the audacity to question their entitlement has shaken them. Nandi-Ndaitwah's action reveals the hypocrisy of their rules-based order, which shakes them. A system that appears to be in place only when it works for them. We have to face a harsh reality in order to comprehend the significance of this moment. African countries have gone to great lengths to please the West for far too long. Our leaders have ingrained a subservience that has kept us on our knees. Many of them were trained in colonial classrooms or were enticed by Western funding. The disparity is obvious when it comes to visa regulations. For example, the United States. A Namibian person who wants to travel must deal with a complex set of requirements. A non-refundable $185 application cost, which is unaffordable for most, a taxing interview at the US Embassy, bank statements, evidence of Namibian ties, and a lengthy wait period that can last for months without any assurance that their application will be accepted. The process is meant to humiliate us and remind us of our position in their world, and rejection rates are extremely high. Compare that to the US experience in Namibia up to this point. They would arrive at Hosea Kotaku International Airport, show their passports, and pass immigration without any questioning. The same is true throughout Africa, the UK, France, Germany, and any other Western nation. Their residents get visa-free or visa-on-arrival access to our countries, while our people are subjected to racial profiling, visa denials, and open contempt when we approach them. Why? Because we've been conditioned to think that their investors and visitors are our salvation, and that their acceptance is our validation. There is a reason for this double standard. It is a holdover from colonialism, a means of controlling Africa. Western countries have long believed they have complete control over this situation. We're supposed to grin and say thank you, while they take our resources, set our policies, and topple our governments. Additionally, they treat us like possible criminals when we visit their countries, closely observing everything we do. However, we give them the red carpet when they come to visit. A remnant of a time when they drew our borders and took our souls, it is a horrible asymmetry. On stage left, Nandi-Ndaitwah arrives with a vision that completely changes the course of this story. Her new visa policy is a statement of self-respect rather than a tit-for-tat. Americans and nationals of 32 other non-reciprocating nations will have to apply for a visa online or in person starting April 1, 2025, and pay $90 to enter Namibia. The cost is small, a small portion of what Namibians have to deal with, but the significance is enormous. You can no longer treat us like second-class citizens while we treat you like royalty, it tells the West. This has nothing to do with excluding tourists. The goal is to level the playing field. The Immigration Ministry of Namibia has been very clear. We've shown your citizens kindness, but you haven't done the same. We are now guaranteeing equity and impartiality. Additionally, Namibia has a simplified visa application process in contrast to the lengthy US one. Get your 90-day visa by applying online or paying at the border, then head out to enjoy the wildlife and dunes. Without a doubt, it's a line in the sand, but it's reciprocity with a smile. This action is being heralded as a wake-up call throughout Africa. People are giddy with pride from Accra to Addis Ababa. They say, at last, a leader with a backbone. The conversation on social media is lively. Both Namibians and Africans are referring to Nandi-Ndaitwah as a lioness, Traore's sister, and a ray of hope. She is the leader they have been longing for, one who doesn't back down in the face of Western force. Who wouldn't reciprocate a pat on the head for dignity? By holding the keys to our own kingdoms, she is demonstrating that African nations are capable of establishing their own regulations and that we do not have to rely on charity. A larger trend that is sweeping Africa includes Nandi-Ndaitwah's visa strategy. Consider Kenya, where President William Ruto has advocated for all Africans to be admitted without a visa, a drastic move that would promote continental solidarity. Take a look at Ghana, which has welcomed holders of African passports. Consider Traore's Burkina Faso, which rejected French rule and forged new partnerships with Mali and Russia. These are not isolated incidents. They are the beginnings of a Pan-African renaissance, a rejection of the status quo in which we follow orders from Western countries. The stakes are enormous for Namibia. Tens of thousands of people are employed by tourism, which contributes close to 7% of its GDP. The majority of the critics are Western defenders and their local representatives. Caution that this regulation may discourage American tourists, resulting in lost income and jobs. But let's resist the urge to believe that scare tactic. The stunning scenery of Namibia won't be abandoned by Americans for a $90 fee that they can pay when they get there. And it's okay if they do. The dignity of Namibia is not for sale. In addition, the government of Nandi-Ndaitwah is counting on a boom in African travel. Namibia will no longer be viewed as a Western vassal by visitors from the continent, but rather as a proud and proactive destination. It's a diplomatic power move as well. Namibia is applying pressure on the 33 non-reciprocating nations, including powerful nations like the US, UK, and Canada, to reconsider their own policies. What if other African countries do the same? Imagine the AU putting up a united front and demanding that the West treat them equally. These countries may be forced to treat us as equals rather than subjects if the balance of power changes. It's our time, fellow Africans. We have been told for generations that we are at the bottom and that our job is to serve, to please, to endure. All too frequently, our leaders have cooperated, exchanging our pride for foreign assistance or a place at their tables. However, like Traore, Nandi-Ndaitwah is pointing us in a different direction. She is demonstrating to us our strength, our ability to demand respect, and our ability to change the norms of interaction. This visa policy affects all of us, not just Namibia. It concerns the Ghanaian business owner who, in spite of having a successful company, was refused a US visa. It concerns the Nigerian student who was turned away by the UK due to bias. It concerns all Africans who have experienced the hurt of Western contempt. We've been split and haven't had the guts to say no, so we've let the West give us harsh orders for far too long. We learned from our colonial heritage to desire their praise and to fear their fury. But that is a vanishing era. African leaders can stare the West in the eye and not wince, as demonstrated by Nandi-Ndaitwah. She is demonstrating that we can assert our sovereignty without their consent. And she's breaking all the stereotypes they've put on us by doing it as a black African lady. Will there be opposition? Naturally. When the locals get resentful, the West dislikes it. They will accuse, threaten, or damage Namibia's reputation. Nandi-Ndaitwah, however, is not flinching. She possesses both the knowledge of a stateswoman and the tenacity of a liberation fighter. She is aware that this goes beyond the quantity of tourists. It's about leaving a legacy and sowing the seeds for a more powerful and proud Africa. So, brothers and sisters, let's unite behind her. Let's raise her voice, honor her bravery, and encourage our own leaders to do the same. Let's demand reciprocity in all areas where we have been underserved, including commerce, diplomacy, and visas. Let's create an Africa where our countries aren't used as stepping stones for Western aspirations, and where our children don't have to beg to travel the world. A match has been lighted by Nandi-Ndaitwah. We are responsible for fanning the flames. The message is clear from Ouagadougou to Windhoek. Africa is not going to be subdued. It is proud and awake. The continent is listening to the lion's roar. Before I wrap up, let me say something I feel compelled to include. It's time, brothers and sisters of this vast continent, to have an honest discussion about a stark reality that cuts through the glitz and glamour, the well-tailored suits, and the polite handshakes. Instead than marching out to summits held by single states that call them to their office like kids, African leaders ought to quit embarrassing themselves, and consequently, the rest of us. These events, Africa receives little more than picture ops and ambiguous promises, whether the invitation is in Washington, Beijing, Paris, or another location. Enough is enough, even though the calling nations leave with resource access, economic agreements, and geopolitical clout that keep our continent bound to their plans. Our politicians should focus their energies on creating a united Africa, beginning with a strong One Africa visa, rather than wasting them on these pointless pilgrimages. Also draw motivation from the audacious actions of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, whose alliance of Sahel states is demonstrating that success is achieved by solidarity rather than subservience. Well, let's paint a clear image. Picture the scene. At the request of a single nation, dozens of African heads of state, each representing millions of people and large, resource-rich territories, board aircraft to gather in a foreign metropolis. Just the appearance is degrading. A procession of leaders who are called to sit at someone else's table, and hear talks about partnership that somehow always wind up with Africa at the bottom. For example, the 2022 US-Africa Leaders Summit. The Biden administration praised the African Union's G20 membership, promised $55 billion over 3 years, and rolled out the red carpet. Doesn't it sound good? However, when we remove the layers, what do we discover? An emphasis on US interests, maintaining Africa's compliance in their global chess game, protecting mineral supply routes for US tech corporations, and opposing China and Russia. To what extent did the typical African farmer, trader, or student benefit from that $55 billion? How much of it changed the balance of power, so that Africa is now in control of its own fate, rather than merely a provider of raw materials? It's a precious tiny, I bet. It's not just Americans either. The same pattern is used by China's Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, or FOCAC. Billions of dollars have been spent on infrastructure projects and loans, which frequently leave African countries impoverished, while mines and ports covertly fall into Western hands. While Russia dangles military help to maintain a foothold in the Sahel, France, our former colonial acquaintance, continues to cling to influence through summits that smack of paternalism. These events are all presented as win-win situations, but let's face it, the feasts these countries enjoy make Africa's victories seem insignificant. Our leaders bring back signed memoranda of agreement, which are elegant documents that rarely result in real benefits for the populace. While the summoned nations gain access to our markets, oil, cobalt, and lithium, we're still acting like the scrambled in this contemporary race for Africa. Now, compare this to what can happen when African countries take charge of their own destiny. Consider Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, 3 nations that have demonstrated to the world what can be accomplished through unity in a few months. They declared their departure from the Union in January 2024 because they were tired of the harsh sanctions imposed by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. They formally withdrew from ECOWAS on January 29, 2025, after signing a confederation contract under the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, in July. They have created a 5,000-member joint military unit to combat Islamist threats, issued new AES passports, and started establishing the framework for a regional parliament and bank in less than a year. It's more than just talk. Without caving in to outside pressure or waiting for ECOWAS to straighten itself, there are tangible steps toward independence and sovereignty. Why, therefore, aren't our leaders building on this momentum? Why don't they sit in Addis Ababa, Nairobi, or Accra and work on a One Africa visa that might compete with the European Schengen area? Imagine being able to travel freely between 54 countries with just one visa. Unleashing a 1.4 billion person continent with a combined GDP of more than $3 trillion. We can no longer rely on foreign capitals to control our movements, fragmented markets that hinder trade, or begging for permits to visit our own neighbors. A start, although a sluggish one, is the African Union's Protocol on Free Movement, which has been signed by 32 nations, but only ratified by 4, including Mali and Niger. By combining it with a single visa system that fortifies our borders while allowing them to open to one another, our leaders may give it new life. The economic increase from commerce, investment, and tourism alone would outweigh the meager benefits of international summits. The blueprint is shown to us by the AES. Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso did not wait for approval. they took action. They turned to friends like Russia and Turkey on their terms, rejected the ECOWAS's neo-colonial overtones, and drove out French troops. The point is agency, notwithstanding the criticism that they are exchanging one master for another. Instead of having their path predetermined for them, they are selecting it. And the outcomes are very clear. The AES is creating a confederation that puts its citizens' security and sovereignty first, while ECOWAS struggles. What if South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, and other countries banded together to present a unified front as this spirit spread? To be patronized, we wouldn't have to go half the world. We would be too busy creating a table where all African voices are heard. Let's not romanticize it though. Unity is difficult. The AES has difficulties. Landlocked countries' economic isolation, continuous insurgencies, and the danger of being overly dependent on new partners. However, the sloth of larger organizations like the African Union and ECOWAS, which all too frequently put procedure before action, is shamed by their progress. Our disparities would not be eliminated by a One Africa visa. Political, linguistic, and tribal, but it would compel us to face them collectively rather than as puppets of other forces. The dream of Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, and Thomas Sankara, a continent that rises, not bows, is being approached. So, I say this to our leaders. Put an end to the humiliating act. The next time you receive a summons from Beijing or Washington, call your counterparts and politely decline. Meet at Ouagadougou, Kigali, or Lagos, not as visitors to a foreign land, but as creators of Africa's destiny. Try to get that one visa to Africa. Expand on the AES's model. Bring us together for the generations who deserve better than scraps from someone else's table, not for the cameras. If we continue to dance to music that isn't ours, history won't pardon us in front of the world. Let's compose a song ourselves. One of solidarity, power, and honor. Tell us what you think in the comments section below. Subscribe for more.